Could you each introduce yourselves and sorry, I couldn't change my slide then. I'll start that again. Could you each introduce yourselves and give a short overview of your career today and how you got started in the industry? So I will start with you, Luke. That's okay. And I'll stop sharing for now.
Yeah, of course. I had a feeling you were going to pick me. I was like, I can just sense it. Hi, everyone. My name is Luke Oliveira-Davies. I'm a creative producer and founder of Polari, which is a production company based in Manchester. And the ethos of the company is to spotlight marginalized and queer voices and communities. An overview of my career, I studied film and media at University of Salford. So I did a BA and an MA. And then coming out of that, I went to work at a production company here in Manchester, working as an office assistant, kind of transitioned into development. And then I stepped away from all of that to pursue setting up my own production company. So for the past 6 years, been in the wild, wild west, trying to do that, doing freelance, working ad hoc for other companies. And alongside what I've already mentioned, I also work for an arts company called Future Everything as a producer as well.
So many different hats, Luke.
Lots.
Ash, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'm Ash, and I actually just this week got promoted to senior account exec at Citypress. Um, and Citypress is one of the fastest growing PR agencies in the Northwest, and I joined as part of their grad scheme 2 years ago through Creative Access actually. And I've been here I've been working across some various corporate PR programs, so KPMG's press office, Silent Night, and LDC, which is like the private equity arm of Lloyd's Bank. Yeah, and in terms of like background, I did a degree in English literature and American studies at the University of Manchester. So I've been in Manchester my entire life, so I know the area quite well.
That's great. Thanks, Ash, and massive congrats on the promotion. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
Will, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, hi there. Good evening. Congrats, Ash. Well done. It's good news. My name is Will, based in Scotland, freelance composer, musical director, musician, all the hats that go with that. I come from a tiny little village in Scotland, but moved to Edinburgh to do a music degree. I travelled the world on a cruise ship, came home and got some gigs in musical theatre. I've done a lot of productions in theatre and then recently did a MA in composition. I'm really in a transition now into writing for media and I do lots of weird and wonderful things in that. Uh, Lots of sync music, films, animation, and TV programs.
Amazing. Again, like such varied experience. I think it'll be really exciting for us to dig into that a little bit more later on. I guess part of the reason we're all here tonight is because we want to shine a light on the fact that there are creative careers outside of London and there are ways to do it. Obviously, we often hear that the creative industries are really London-centric, and I think they are, but I think you three are a great example of people who are forging careers in really interesting ways in different areas of the UK. Um, but I kind of wanted to hear a little bit about what you think the biggest misconceptions are about working in the creative industries regionally. Um, oh, sorry, just a reminder to please keep on mute while we're talking. Thank you. Um, Ash, would you like to talk a little bit about being based in Manchester and how that shapes your career? And yeah, do you feel like what are the benefits of being in Manchester versus being in London?
I think the trickiest part is obviously navigating a creative landscape that is still emerging. Like it's not by any means as established as London. But I think like creative access and also being at City Press has helped a lot with that because I've been able with creative access, I've been able to see what opportunities were out there for people like me in the area that I wanted rather than obviously just assuming that everything is in London. In terms of like my actual career, I think I've been really lucky with City Press because obviously it's a Manchester headquartered firm, so I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything about London. Because like Manchester is our central hub, so everyone comes to Manchester. And I've also been given multiple opportunities to travel down to London and obviously like go for a day or go for a night. So I've been able to kind of experience the like creative scene in London without
Mm.
actually having to pay the extortionate prices. So I think I've been quite lucky in that aspect.
Amazing. Yeah, I think there's something so nice about knowing that you're not missing out. Actually, there's a whole buzz to what's going on in Manchester at the moment. It's an emerging scene, and that's really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah.
Luke, you're also based in Manchester. Would you echo Ash's kind of ideas of not missing out just because you're based in Manchester?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that's been the biggest strength for me in building my career, as I said, I worked in a contracted role for a very established production company and kind of stepped away from that. And so it was all from scratch. And one of the biggest opportunities was to create my own opportunities. And I think that, I grew up in Manchester. I'm from Rochdale, just outside Manchester. And I experienced a time where, Media City was the promise of what media was going to be for Manchester. And whilst that is, an infrastructure in itself, it's not necessarily turned into kind of what this like dream was. And I think that just goes to show that the creative network that's going to be built around that and outside of that is just as valuable to people's networks. And I think a lot of people from London end up tapping into those and end up moving here because they find that there are more things that they can just make happen on their own terms, and yeah, there's just a freedom to that. I think sometimes I have lived in London very, very briefly. It did not pan out. I lived there for like 3 months. And I just feel that as much as there is opportunity there's as many people as there is opportunities. And I think sometimes when you're in the regions, yes, there's less opportunities, but that means more space to make them. And so that's the way that I've always seen it, as it's not a lack of, it's the opportunity to do more.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's something we always say at Creative Access is, what can you do yourself to kind of create your own opportunities? Like, can you start your own newsletter? Can you start your own podcast? Can you get a TikTok page dedicated to something you're really passionate about and use that to showcase who you are, but also to connect with, other like-minded individuals who, and, you never know what opportunities are going to come from that. Obviously, the industries are London-centric at the moment still, and like you were saying, there are still those lack of opportunities, and I guess it's important for us to recognize how you can overcome those barriers as well, such as travel limitations, reduced access to networks, and even things like accent bias. Will, as a creative living in Scotland, can you speak a little bit about the biggest challenges you faced living and working outside of London and how you've managed to navigate them and overcome them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we're quite lucky in Scotland that the scene is quite healthy. I was just at an animation festival here in Edinburgh last week. And it's quite amazing. I spoke to 3 or 4 producers from down south, and they're actually contemplating moving to Scotland. It's like, wow, this is incredible. Because of the support from Creative Scotland and the kind of art scene up here in general, there's probably 5 or 6 animation companies that are doing some phenomenal work, as well as other production companies. So it's actually quite refreshing to hear some people want to jump ship and move north, which is great. That being said, still problems networking.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
still,
carry
that's
on.
okay. I'll let Tom off. Still problems networking, but it's way better than what it used to be. Just through, Zoom and setting up meetings and things. But I'll talk a bit later about this, but face-to-face meetings is definitely the way forward, because it's all about trust. And it's a massive thing in this industry, is getting to know people.
Yeah, totally. Could you, just for anyone who's not aware, clarify what Creative Scotland do, just for anyone on the call that might be based up there and would
Yeah,
like to know more?
well, I'm still learning myself, but there's
Okay.
lots of grants available. Do you know, I just found out about one last week about giving you money to go and travel to festivals, which is like, oh, I didn't even know that existed. There's lots of help out there, just various grants and things that apparently is not so widely available down south, which I'm really saddened to hear. I
Yeah.
think it's all form of arts we need to be supported. Uh, so yeah, come to Scotland.
Yeah. That's a great advertisement. Um, Luke, you've mentioned, you kind of established your own company outside London and you now work in a different kind of role. Could you talk about some of the skills that have been essential to sort of building more of a portfolio career? And why would you recommend diversifying your income or your work to other creatives based outside London?
Yeah, so for me, there was a big kind of hurdle that I had to get over, which was that when I decided to set up the company and kind of pursue that career, but first, I had to recognize that that is a marathon, not a sprint, and it doesn't necessarily bring in income overnight. Full transparency, it didn't really necessarily bring a stable income for me throughout the duration up to now. It's always been kind of project-based funding, or I've been lucky enough to kind of supplement that work with like workshops and different things like that.
Mhm.
And so I really had to kind of confront this idea that if I had the dream to build a company, and I wanted that to look like a certain thing, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. In the meantime, that didn't always, it's not always going to be linear. And I think that there are times, especially now, which is funny because I'm a bit more established than I was then, even more so now, I've realized I've come to value financial stability a lot. I think that that's meant that I recognize how not being financially stable affects my creativity, affects my ability to show up as a producer, as a collaborator, be reliable, and therefore that's taken down or kind of calmed my fears in looking at other work and just going, these next 6 months, I can't really prioritize Polari because it's not bringing in anything for me to pay rent. I'm just completely stressed. I'm not going to be able to collaborate on things. So that made me feel like confident that everything I'm doing around Polari feeds into that, because at the end of the day, Polari really is me. Like, there's no big corporation, there's no big team, it's just me running it. And so I've got to kind of feed into that well, whether that be, income, whether it be mental health, whatever it might be, just being creatively fulfilled, period. It doesn't mean through Polari, just that's the only avenue. And so I think that freed me up to try other things. And in my current role, it's been interesting because I'm working full time. And so now Polari is not a priority just because of the nature of having a full time role. But what I see in my mind is that I've committed to this for 12 months. And that is feeding into my knowledge of finance and budgets and networking. And, it's working for someone else, but it's still feeding that dream because I'm there with it, I'm part of that.
Yeah, completely. I think there's something in that about maybe reframing what our idea of success looks like, and realizing that maybe your career is going to be a bit more squiggly because you'll know, maybe if you're not based in London, you're not going to go straight into that role, which is your dream role. You're kind of maybe going to have to do a few different things, do a bit of portfolio work, switch careers, like Will, you were saying, switching from kind of theatre into TV, and Luke the same. And I think it's sometimes you have to work on your perspective, right? Of what does that look like? What does good look like? And what does it mean for me and who I am and my morals and my standards? Rather than, I think it can be difficult when you're comparing yourself on LinkedIn or like Instagram or whatever to people, and it's not always the reality. I guess that's why tapping into your networks is so important, especially where you are. Um, I suppose, it's vital, right, to have a community of people that are similar to you and are doing the same thing and are, have the same goals. Will, you're currently on our Thrive program, and you have a mentor, and you've spoke a little bit about already kind of going to those client face-to-face meetings and how they're actually essential in building trust. Could you expand on that and give us some of your top tips for sustaining professional connections and mentoring relationships as well?
Yeah, very fortunate with you guys. You pair me up with Lauren Balfe, which his IMDb credits are phenomenal. So it's a phenomenal thing to be a part of, and very fortunate. I also got another mentor, John, part of that team, who's just been so invaluable, because I am making a transition, so I fully empathise with you guys starting out, because it does feel a wee bit like starting out again, albeit I am quite established in different fields, but not necessarily. I want to get into animation, uh, and it generally does feel like I'm starting again. So I'm doing a lot of networking at the moment, and I'm sending out a gazillion emails, but emails are almost a waste of time. But one-to-one meetings are so invaluable because people can actually speak to you and realise you're not a band pot. I don't know if that's a Scottish word or not. But I think when people get to know you and trust you, because these people who are making, certainly my line of work, programs, their budgets are massive. You know, so if you send a cold email to someone, say, hi, I'd like to, you know, write your music for you. Like, not happening. But I'm probably into my second year of networking, and it's only now I'm being introduced to people. So it is a bit of a slog, but definitely face to face is the way to go, which is obviously not great when you know you're maybe remote. But as I said, I was at an animation festival in Edinburgh last week, so have a look around your area. There will be things happening, but get to know your local area as well, because there'll be people there to help you, and you just need to get to know them.
Yeah, totally agree. There's definitely the people there. You just kind of need to go out and find them and be proactive and look into them. Yeah, it's so interesting, having that experience of you're not starting out, you're kind of more at mid-level, but it feels like you're starting out again. And networking is so important. And I guess one thing that I really took away from that, I guess, is obviously meeting people face to face. So maybe it's a case of like being really intentional about that one networking event that you're going to go to because you know there's someone there that you want to speak to that could be a potential client or could help you get your next role. And I guess also be patient because the role or the project doesn't always come straight away. It's kind of about nurturing that relationship, isn't it? Of, keeping people warm throughout the year and checking in and being like, would love to grab like a virtual coffee or whatever it is. Or I'm actually in London that day for work. I'd love to come into your office and have a chat. So yeah, I think be really intentional. And if you go to a networking event and you meet one person and that one person could be a lead later on down the line, then that's a success. Like you've done really well. But yeah, also tapping into those networks that are nearby. Ash, can you maybe speak to that about, in Manchester, you were saying Citypress is actually, that's where they're headquartered. So it's kind of, you're not like a London office that has like a satellite office in Manchester. This is actually your headquarters. Can you talk a little bit about building meaningful PR industry connections? So like with clients and with journalists, whilst being outside London and how having that HQ there really helps that.
Yeah. I think because I'm specializing in like corporate PR, I think a lot of firms have started to have like regional offices as well. So, and they find it really helpful to have PR teams that have like on the ground regional presence across like various different areas. Um, so I think in terms of like building a connection, I've been able to like build some really strong connections with like the Northwest hubs for some of my accounts because they're literally like round the corner at St. Peter's Square or like in Spinningfield. So it's literally just a walk away. In terms of journalists as well, Luke, like you mentioned, obviously like Media City and BBC have obviously moved down here, and City AM, who is obviously quite a London-centric national media title, but obviously they've been bought by a like THG, which is based in Stockport, so they've now got journalists that are based here as well. So it's kind of like we have still been able to maintain like this face-to-face contact. We have been able to like take them out for coffee and like have like a couple of media meets, regardless of whether we're in London or not. So I think, yeah, more and more people are realizing that not everything has to be in London, and I think it's just a really exciting time to be in the creative industry.
Yeah, totally. Do you have any like networks or groups that you're a part of that are Manchester based or like any recommendations you might have for people on the call today to check out in their local areas in for PR or it can be wider?
I don't think there's any like Manchester-based ones, but in terms of like networking with other PR professionals, there's a platform called Rox Hill where it's like basically a platform where all journalists like put their contact information, and they run a bunch of networking sessions, whether that be in London or virtual or elsewhere. And I think that's a really good way to either network with like people that are in the same career as you and also speak to journalists about how to get into their publications. So I think yeah, Rox Hill is probably the best bet for aspiring PR professionals.
Super helpful, thank you. And Luke, I'm going to throw that to you as well. Are there any specific networks or groups or communities that you're a part of that you'd love to shout out and that people should get involved with?
The first I'll shout out is one that I co-founded, which is for queer filmmakers. So
Love
it's
the
called the Queer.
self-promo.
Like, gotta get that out there. So it's the Queer Filmmakers Network. It's a social enterprise. I'll send some links at the end of the call. But yeah, it's a WhatsApp community. It has over 500 members now, which is really cool. A lot of people just sharing work, things like that. If you are near Manchester, I run a short film night called Origins. You know, a lot of filmmakers meet there. But in all honesty, I'm in a lot of WhatsApp groups and WhatsApp communities. I know that people go through a bit of a period where they feel really overwhelmed by them. I will genuinely tell you right now, all of the communities and groups that I'm in are muted and archived, and I just look at them on my own, like on my own time. That's completely fine. There's just too much happening. But what it is that I have now developed over kind of the 6 years I've been producing, it's just you're in these circles, so you don't necessarily have to be pushing as hard. If you can just start browsing what people are talking about, start to see the same names, you start to see the same opportunities. And I've spent time at the beginning of my career just on Instagram looking at other, I'll speak from film specifically, other filmmakers, looking through who they follow, you know, and just seeing who they engage with and connecting with those people as well. And you just kind of start to build, you start to tap into that pre-existing network a little bit. And when you go to kind of short film nights or festivals, yeah, you just start to meet some of the same people. They bring you to things, you bring them to things, and it's just like a very organic way to approach it, I guess.
Yeah, it's totally like a snowball effect, isn't it? I feel like once you're in one, then you kind of
Definitely.
discover all these other networks that you never even knew existed. And Will, apart from like people checking out Creative Scotland, do you have any specific networks you'd really recommend as well, or communities that you're a part of?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question and very good timing because today I got an email from a very kind lady at BBC Scotland who sent me a whole load of Facebook groups to join, which I
Nice.
can actually forward to you and you can maybe send out to
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
Things like TV Talent Scotland, not just Scottish ones, there's like UK ones as well. There's lots in there. And I've got it in a document I'll send down to you.
Yeah, that's well worth saying. We always do a write-up of our masterclasses, so we'll make sure that tomorrow, when that goes live on our site or later on this week, we've got like a list of all the networks and links that everyone has mentioned just then, because that's so helpful to know. And yeah, it's just so great to know that these things do actually exist. So be reassured, they're out there. And that kind of leads quite nicely. Well, obviously, as a freelance composer, can you give us some advice on how to best showcase your experience as a freelancer, especially, you know, someone like you that has kind of switched around in a couple of different sectors? Do you have any like portfolio tips that you just think are a must-have for people?
Yeah, I say get a website, particularly for me. Make sure it's up to date and you're really showcasing your best work. And if you do happen to secure a meeting with someone, uh, you know, sometimes people like to see work there and then, sometimes they don't. So what I even just learned this last week, I was meeting a fairly high power production guy, and I got my iPad out. So I've got a show reel for you of animation and put the headphones on, and he just took them off after like 30 seconds. And I thought, oh, this is not went well. And I said, I don't need to see this now. I want to know about you as a person. Tell me your story. I'm like, okay. So I think maybe asking people if you do have a one-to-one, like, we'd like to see some work now, or can I send you some? And then just, yeah, showcase your best work is what I would say. And if you don't have like any work you've got out there, you know, work on stuff and try and make it as best as possible and get feedback on that work is my advice I would strongly recommend.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's like having a friend or a family member or someone you know and trust to kind of look over it and be like, this makes sense. This doesn't make so much sense. I don't know why you're
Yeah.
showcasing that, but you should be showcasing this. Someone that you know is going to be honest with you, I think is the most important thing. And I'll just add to that as well. If you are in a place where you've not freelanced before or you don't have a portfolio yet because you've not got any experience in lots of different sectors, there are ways that you can kind of showcase that. So for example, in advertising and like PR and marketing, you can Google client briefs and you can come up with a response to that from, and that's you coming up to, that's like kind of free sources that you can find on Google, like D and AD offer a lot of those like free creative briefs. You can kind of choose an advert or choose a piece of copy and say, here's what I'd do differently, here's how I'd make that better. And I think I mean, I'm saying that from obviously the PR and marketing sector, but there's loads of ways you can kind of showcase your skills if you haven't got actual job experience yet. Just be creative and showcase yourself. um Luke, do you have any tips on securing that freelance work when beyond just networking?
Yeah, I did make some notes. Yeah, I agree with the website thing 100%. It took me ages to get a website, and then I just think it serves as a way more creative CV and a more creative portfolio. And having an up-to-date LinkedIn. I think one of the things I've found is because I get hired for work and I also hire crew for work. And when it comes to things like LinkedIn or Instagram, I think it is really about similar to what Will experiences. Like, tell us about you, the behind the scenes, what you're interested in. I've hired people on films on projects where they haven't had any credits, and it's just been about, oh, I did this in uni, I worked with my friends, I go to film festivals, I do short film night, like blah, blah, blah. It's like just showing that passion to connect to the industry. I think that kind of setting up your own small communities is a good way to show that you're proactive. I think that's a really strong skill. Yeah, definitely agree with reaching out to people for coffee. The amount of LinkedIn messages I get that are just completely cold, when all they could, if they actually knew, all they need to say is, can I go for coffee? And I absolutely will. And I've met many people for coffee, and much prefer it over just like an approach for work. And then I actually got the job that I currently am in because I found it on Instagram. And so I follow a lot of pages like I Like Networking is one. But if you look at I Like Networking and similar jobs boards, there's industry specific ones or just creative industries ones. I've seen so many opportunities from there, and sent them to friends who've got the jobs or got the opportunities. I think that's a really strong platform to find work. And just making sure if you're in film or TV, a talent manager profile is pretty good as well. People use that. Any of those types of job boards, I wouldn't agree with paying for them. I'm never doing that really. If you want to, that's up to you. But I would encourage you to just try and use free platforms, or if for a website, they're usually quite cheap. You pay for that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's just about being out there and like being very clear about what you want to do, and yeah, sharing your story, connecting with people. I think those are things that just can be ongoing, and eventually somebody thinks of you or mentions your name in a room, and then it really starts the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think a big tip that I'm taking from all of you is whenever you cold email someone, try and make it a little bit warm and, give a little bit of information about yourself. What is your specific ask? You want to go for a coffee, but what do you want to learn from that person? I think if you're specifically asking, I really liked this project you worked on, and I'd love to understand how you got it commissioned or how you did X, Y, and Z, rather than just kind of saying, can I pick your brains? I think it hopefully will make people respond a bit more. And I think people generally are nice, like Luke, who is happy to just go for a coffee with anyone. So yeah, perfect. Um, Ash, to come back to you, obviously you've just been promoted, which is amazing. So can you give us some advice on navigating career progression outside London when maybe there's not as many opportunities or as many PR agencies? Yeah, how have you navigated that so far, and do you have any advice for our audience on doing that?
Yeah. I think I really hate saying this, but I think in the creative industries, it is like a lot of it is like it's about who you know, not what you know. Like I think it's really important to know exactly what you're getting into and like have the experience. But like we were obviously talking about, networking is a huge part of getting into the creative industries and like progressing. And I think obviously I've mentioned creative access so much in this anyway, but like being part of creative access when I first started looking for a career was really helpful because not only would obviously get a massive platform to see what jobs were out there in like the areas I was looking at, I also like was able to network with like a bunch of people that were also part of Creative Access. And then for like I joined Citypress as part of their grad scheme, and the way they do it is so, I just think it's a very good grad scheme to be a part of, because it's not just like full of training. You basically get thrown in at the deep end and you get like introduced to clients like right on like right from the beginning, and your like training kind of like aligns with the things you're actually doing, so you're basically learning on the job, and you're also like just able to like learn from like more senior people in the office, and I think that's really helpful because it's actually been able to like allowed me to build like a solid foundation to actually like build on as well.
Yeah, totally. That's really great to hear. And I guess, do you think off the back of that that those regional opportunities are becoming more common? Are you seeing, as Citypress is growing, are you kind of seeing rival PR companies growing in the same way? I know you mentioned it obviously about a lot of the corporate companies that you work with are branching out and getting a regional base. And as we know, the government have promised to kind of invest a lot in the creative industries, hopefully outside London as well. I think it will be by the looks of the plans so far. So yeah, are you seeing that happening in the Northwest as well?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there've definitely been like a couple of, like LinkedIn messages about like job openings for like Northwest firms. But yeah, no, I think because even at Citypress, we're looking to expand. Like we've got an Edinburgh office as well, and like I think they've been like 8 people for a while. So they're looking to expand. We're obviously hiring all the time, so it's like the PR is noticing that like there is a shift away from London, and I think clients are also noticing. So I think
Yeah.
it's like that'll increase probably in the next coming years.
Totally. It's so interesting. I know that a lot of the publishers that we work with, such as like Hachette and Bonnier Books and HarperCollins, also now have offices outside London. So like in Sheffield, Edinburgh, Bristol. So I think it is kind of a case of keeping your eyes peeled for, if you really like a big company or over a small company and you follow them on LinkedIn and kind of keeping an eye out in the news, following those industry trades like the bookseller or PR week or broadcast for TV and keeping your eye out and seeing kind of what the moves are is a really good way of seeing where the opportunities are going to land. But speaking of shifts as well, Luke, we know at the moment there have been some shifts in the TV industry. What kind of transferable skills do you think people should be tapping into if they're looking for opportunities either in TV or if they want to pivot into something a bit different? What are the kind of core skills you would say are important for the TV and film industry right now?
Would say right off the bat confidence, and I think that I want to say this because it's really important, is that confidence is not arrogance, right? In film and TV, I've met a lot of confident people, right, in the earlier stages of my career, and thankfully there's more of a dialogue happening about how difficult it is to work in film and TV, long hours, mental health issues, all those different things, and I think that's opening people up a little bit more to be honest about the challenges. And so when I talk about confidence, it's just feeling secure in yourself, feeling passionate about your work and your ideas. And I think that if that is a skill, like it really is. It's not something that you are or you aren't. It is a skill. And I've had this conversation with many stage filmmakers who just think, well, I'm an introvert. It's like, that's fine, be an introvert. But when you talk about your ideas, you've got to care about them the most. You've got to care about you the most and your passion. And that really comes across in any room, as we know, I'm sure everybody knows those kind of people, and personal or professional. So I think that's one. And so just find ways to strengthen that if it's not something that comes naturally. I think having a drive, like an ambition. I think being inquisitive, being nosy, being curious, I think those are really good skills. Those are all things that definitely got me into rooms or meetings where I wouldn't have been if I didn't ask. When I worked at a TV production company in my first job as an office assistant, the only reason I transitioned into development is because I kept asking to read scripts, asking to go to plays and review them for people, as that was on top of my job. Obviously don't burn out and don't do more than you can handle. But I think it's just about like what's next and showing enthusiasm that really comes across. and just knowing how to deal with people. I got more skills from working in a Wetherspoon's Kitchen, a cinema, a River Island. Like those were all transferable experiences of working with people, the public, to bring into TV than any of like my degrees basically. Because you just have to be tenacious, you have to be proactive, adaptable. So I think if you are working outside of the creative industries right now, everything you're going through in your job, all of it is beneficial, especially if you're working in the public, because you will become the most adaptable person ever for when you do start to explore, more creative pathway.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's something we often say to our candidates. And also, we have so many people on our team who have started out like in hospitality. And I think, working those jobs, it really does teach you how to think on your feet. And, sometimes you're dealing with not very nice customers. And, you have to kind of learn how to be diplomatic and keep the peace and be polite. And I think it's a really good skill, a life skill to have that you don't just need for your job. You kind of need that in life, full stop. But I think every job in the creative industries, you need to know how to communicate with people. You need to know how to get your ideas across in a succinct way, in a way that's going to kind of be appealing to whoever you're trying to get them across to, and hopefully convince them to either fund your project or become your client or like whatever it is. So yeah, I guess off the back of that, I'm going to put the question to Ash and Will as well. What is, your key piece of advice for anyone looking to build a creative career regionally? Will, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say don't wait for opportunities, go and create them. Get yourself out there, and Luke summed it up brilliantly well. All the things that he mentioned was fantastic. But yeah, get yourself out there. If you're not comfortable getting yourself out there, the good news is you can work on it. Get some help, and if it's a presentation or just general networking, speaking to people, you can work on skills. But if you're passionate about what you want to do, if this is what I want to do with my life, go and do it. But being in the creative industry is hard. I'm telling you, it's hard, but the rewards are phenomenal. If I'm creating a project with a team of people, it's amazing to see it to come to the end and like, wow, we've created this from nothing. I'm a very creative person. I wouldn't cope working anywhere else. Music's all I know. But yeah, it is phenomenal. But get yourself out there, definitely.
Yeah, completely agree. I think making your own opportunities where there might not be any is such a great piece of advice. Ash, do you have any advice you'd like to give to people looking to build a creative career outside London?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to be echoing a lot of what's already been said, but I think the main thing for me is obviously don't try and choose your career based on location. No, sorry, the other way around. Don't base your location on the career you want to go into,
Yeah.
because I think like I fell down that rabbit hole when I like graduated, because I just obviously made the assumption that everything is in London, so I was looking purely in London. And it's just really disheartening when it's like there are so many things happening in London and it's so competitive, and it just feels like you're not getting anywhere because you're not able to like get the next train to go to an interview on the day and stuff. So I think the main thing is choose where you want to like establish yourself and where you want to live, and then look for jobs like that. And I think, Rochelle, like you were saying, if you like sign up to all the like newsletters, if you read or like the trade mags and stuff, you'll be able to find out like what there is out there. But I think that's probably the best thing, best advice I would give.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. It seems like maybe the most obvious stuff is in London, but the really cool stuff is outside London. But that's amazing. I think, yeah, just to echo what Bill Margia said in the chat, we will be going to the Q&A shortly. So please start sending your questions in for our speakers. But before that, I'd like to just get a couple more pieces of advice before we go to the Q&A. Something I wanted to ask all of you is, and maybe Ash, actually, you've already just answered this, so I'll give it to the other two. But if you could go back to the start of your career and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? Luke, do you want to tell us?
Goodness. I was just thinking about this, and I think it does apply. I think it would be kind of be asking the question of like, where am I going? And I think, for example, when I started out kind of pursuing producing, I was making it into this like kind of mammoth thing of like, I need to be making films that are in the cinema, right? And it's like, that's just like kind of not tangible. And so I think it would just be that it's fine if it takes a long time, you know, it's still worthwhile. It's not linear. And it's also just ask myself the question of, what are the steps to kind of get to where I want to be? And that steps can be, where do I want to be next month? Where do I want to be in 3 months? And I think when you start to do that, it doesn't feel as such an insurmountable task to build a career. So I think I'll just ask that question rather than be focusing on what I think success looks like.
Yeah, I think there's something about breaking down the big goal into more achievable goals. Like you said, I mean, yeah, it'd be amazing to create that Hollywood blockbuster, right? But what are all the little things that you need to do to get to that point, and what is it in the space of 3 months or 6 months, like you said, that you need to kind of achieve? So I need to meet up with X amount of people. I need to have X amount of credits under my name. Yeah, I totally agree. And it makes the task feel less daunting. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like if I set myself a really big goal, I just kind of will procrastinate on it because I'm like, oh no, like I just can't bring myself to to like actually tackle doing that. So I think break it down into the smaller bits. What can you do today that will help you tomorrow and that will help you in a year's time? Yeah, I love that advice. Will, is there anything you would add to that as well?
Do you know, I think Luke should have his own podcast. All these fantastic words of advice. It's great. So yeah, look, there's another thing to start. Get a podcast to go. I think do your research. Going back a couple of points to what Luke was saying about LinkedIn. You know, I get some emails and messages from people going, "Hi, I'd like to be a composer. Give me a job." I'm like, what? Like, you know what? I'd say really do your research. If I'm contacting a producer, I'll go through their back catalogue and I'll watch various amounts of things that they've done, or an animator, just to get a feel of what they've done, and send them a genuine email going, I really liked what you did with this, I really liked what you did with that, and go into detail, and then move it into, can I meet you for a coffee type chat. So rather than just being blunt and blasé about just no research at all. So I think, yeah, really do your homework.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it kind of links back to what we were saying earlier about when you cold email someone and you want to go for a coffee or you want to get some advice from them. It's like having that bit of knowledge to sort of flatter them, I guess, and be like, yeah, I loved what you did on X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Um, yeah, just to say as well, please do keep on sending in some questions. We've got a few nice ones already coming through. But yeah, please do send through any questions that you have. I'm going to go for one final question for Luke, Ash, and Will, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Um, Something I thought might be really nice for us to all know is what inspires you the most about being based where you are, and what are the strengths of being based where you are. So, Ash, I'll kickstart with you.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of lucky because obviously Manchester is, if you're thinking about like cities outside of London, I think like Manchester's quite established in its own right. And I think that's quite exciting. And obviously like with the government obviously wanting to do a lot more regional, like just branch out more regionally, whether that be with creative industries or just like with like local authority powers and stuff. Manchester's like been at the forefront of a lot of that. And I think
Yeah.
that's really like quite interesting to see. And I think obviously because I was born and like raised in Manchester as well, and I kind of went to uni in Manchester, I'm quite like aware of like the landscape, like either way, it's like the digital landscape or the business landscape. So that's been really helpful, like when I'm advising clients on things as well. So I think, yeah, in terms of like Manchester as like a way to kind of build a solid foundation in my career is probably the best location I could be in, to be honest.
Yeah, you're like a Manchester expert.
Yeah.
They
So
should
I
get
don't
you running
sound like I'm from
more
Manchester
ads.
though. That's the one thing, I just don't sound like I'm from Manchester at all.
Well, coming from a Brummie, you do. So, yeah, amazing. Luke, what inspires you about Manchester and the Northwest?
I think what inspires me is just the kind of sensibilities and the culture of people from Manchester, from the north in general. I think just makes making opportunities way more accessible and achievable. I think that for the most part, especially in the creative industries, everyone has the same perspective, the same experience, the same challenges. And I think that when you find your people or you build your network, when you do start to build those opportunities for yourself, you'll find a community that's willing to lift you up. And I find that not only from being in Manchester and around kind of people in the region, but from the queer community which I belong to, I find that really like empowering. And so, yeah, I think it's just appreciating the fact that my juniors especially like will support each other and show up for each other and cheerlead each other and vice versa. And so, yeah, I find that that's helped me to this point, whether it be to progress career or just to feel like it's worth my time to kind of like follow my heart and pursue a creative career.
Yeah, I lived in Leeds for 5 years, so I definitely echo that there's something special about the North. Will, can you tell us what inspires you about where you live?
Yeah, and my family definitely first and foremost, and just the area. Like I live in the Fife Coast, and out my window here, which you can't see, is like stunning water and overlook to Edinburgh. So if I'm having a bit of a creative block, I can nip out, have a walk along the coast, and you just feel absolutely amazing. Fresh air and just stunning scenery. I think the people as well, I think it's really shaped me as a person, coming from a small rural place and then moving to the bright lights of Edinburgh. It's like, oh, this is quite a culture shock. Uh, but I think just the people here and the views is just it's phenomenal. I wouldn't live anywhere else.
Yeah, I definitely feel very jealous of you being able to walk on the beach every day. I think I always like go for a walk whenever I'm creatively stuck as well, but slightly different when you're walking around Hackney Marshes in London versus versus a beautiful beach. But yeah, thank you so much, all of you, for answering all these questions so far. I'm going to kickstart the Q&A now. So yeah, again, please do send in some questions if you haven't already. We'll work through them. But the first question that I'm going to go to is from Safia, who said, I'm based in Bristol, but originally from London. And I've noticed that being based in a smaller city has actually allowed me to engage with other UK cities and networks a lot more. I think this expanded UK-wide network is a real perk of being based outside London and was wondering if the panel felt the same. Have you noticed more of a sense of community or connection within and around your localities? I guess you've all kind of just mentioned that idea of, being around people who make you feel inspired. But do any of you want to speak to that a little bit more and kind of dive into that?
Yeah, I
Luke?
can. Yeah, so I literally was just telling someone this the other day. I'm not in a kind of networking phase at the moment, but when I was, I would go to Liverpool, I would go to other cities to network because I think for film and TV, it's like you can work anywhere with anyone essentially. So I think sometimes it's just a focus on your city or your like very direct area or town even. But yeah, I think there is definitely a strength in connecting with kind of other regions. You're finding collaborators at the end of the day, and stories transcend the boundaries of regions and whatever time and space. And so I think there's a benefit to that. And also running the Queer Filmmakers Network, we are purposefully doing events around the regions and trying to tell people from other cities to come to those and not just come to the one that's in their city. Just because it really is, I've done 5 short films and they've all been around the UK and I've had people could drive up and go down and whatever. And so, yeah, I think there is massive benefits to that, especially if you feel that you're struggling to connect with people in your city or town. I think build it elsewhere as long as it's not, too far for you to kind of travel.
Yeah, I'm even thinking from like an economic point of view as well. Like, obviously, the cost of living in London is so high, and it's kind of increased unfortunately across the UK, but I think in London sort of disproportionately. I always think of the band English Teacher who won the Mercury Prize last year. So they're from Leeds, well, based in Leeds, and they said like the reason they've been able to like make this album is because they're based up north and they can afford to live in like a house share and it's not super expensive and they live in a nice house and they can go to the studio and spend money on it. And I think they were kind of working some part-time jobs alongside it, but were able to like, yeah, afford to live and do their creative pursuit as well as, pay the bills and be around like a creative community. So I think, yeah, I totally agree with that. Will or Ash, would either of you add to that? Or shall we skip to the next question?
I
Um,
think Luke's covered it.
yeah. Luke's covered it again. Um, Nazra has asked, how would you convince international clients that you being based in a regional area doesn't make your work less credible or professional? Ash, do you want to talk to that? I know obviously you have clients that you work with. Can you give Nazra some advice?
Yeah, I think for me, the main point that you need to get across is that despite the fact that you're not in London, you know like the area that you're based really, really well,
Mm.
and you know like the specialisms, you know the media landscape, and you know exactly what like the media there will go for. Um, I think like say, so I'm on the KPMG brief, and they're really keen on like building connections with like the Northwest business media landscape. So I think that's like the main thing that me and my colleagues have like tried to reiterate to them is that like we've already built really strong connections with these media targets and we're going to do the same for you. So it's like this, yeah. So you're basically there aren't so much as like there aren't less opportunities outside of London, but there are different opportunities and you're able to build different connections with people than you would have inside in London.
Yeah, I love that. So it's almost like spinning it into a positive. Like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not.
I'm PRing it.
Yeah, PR in it. Yeah, just doing your job basically, Ash. But yeah, like spinning it into how is it a positive? I think that's really helpful to know. Poppy has said an amazing panel. Thank you for this, and asked, I wonder if there are any of the panelists who have tips for building a remote career. I'm from a town rather than a city, and it can be hard to get work because there's not many creative businesses around. Will, would you like to talk to that, seeing as you've had the experience of living in a more rural area versus in a city as well?
Yeah, I can only speak, obviously, being a musician. So yeah, literally 100 people where I came from originally, and it's a case of out doing gigs in the local village hall, old folks' home. I've done them all.
Get the
But
experience
really,
where you can.
exactly, I think it was like 14, 15 at the time. But yeah, it's quite interesting because people talk and will refer you to. That's how business works, isn't it? It's word of mouth for a lot of it. And they will refer you to someone else and someone else. And, when I was at school, I was making quite a decent living as a jobby musician. But it's just really doing what you can as well as you can. Uh, and yeah, definitely word of mouth will help. I'm sorry, I can only speak as a musician. That's what I know, but
That's okay. There's actually a question from Joseph who wants some advice on composing for film and TV, which I think will be perfect for you, Will. Um, they said, when starting out, how do you build up a show reel or portfolio whilst getting paid for your work? So you've kind of just spoken to that, so can you expand?
yeah, oh, good question, Joseph. So if you don't have any like commercial credits, by all means find some things off YouTube and rip them off. And I shouldn't maybe say that, but rescore them, or contact an agency that you've maybe rescored, let's say animation or an advert, and just try and think smartly. And it is difficult, but you've got to use what you can. Uh, Definitely try to think of some video companies off the top of my head, Pond5 and things, and just try and find like free clips or reach out to local video makers who say, look, if you give me some video, I'll put some score to that. I've certainly done that in the past. Being based in Scotland, there's like a gazillion people out with drones filming deers and stags and the glens and the lochs, so you can easily get together with some of those guys. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me and I can happily recommend some bits and bobs.
Yeah, so maybe the key piece of advice there is maybe finding people who are at a similar level to you in film and TV who are making films, making short films, and reaching out to them and asking if, you can provide some music for what they're working on, and I guess doing it together. That's, a really good piece of advice.
Yeah.
Amazing. LJ has asked, how do you continue to stay inspired with your craft without the surrounding networks to foster creativity and inspire new projects? I know we've kind of spoke extensively about finding your people within your area, but maybe, if you're in a super rural area or you're not quite well connected to, a larger area, how do you keep that inspiration without a network around you? Luke, you're smiling, so I'm gonna pick you again.
I'm scared to speak. No, I'm joking. For me, genuinely, again, I'm speaking from a filmmaking perspective, podcasts I find very inspiring. I listen to a lot of kind of behind the scenes of people working on projects, how they built their careers. I don't know if this is applicable to the person's career, but sometimes I will get like accreditations for film festivals online if they have like an online library, and sometimes you can see masterclasses, panels, watch those on YouTube from previous film festivals or similar industry events. Try to connect with peers online. I think it's just about like being able to talk about your craft and with your peers or hear other people talk about it. It just kind of keeps that spark maybe when you're not necessarily working on it yourself. Just like reading, watching films just inspire me on their own. It's just connecting with others and hearing about someone who is working in your craft from a podcast or something, how they engage with that, what they find inspire you.
Yeah,
I hope that's applicable.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And I always think the best kind of piece of creative advice I always try and follow is like, if you're working in a certain medium, try and like consume art that's not in that medium to get a different perspective on the medium that you're working in, right? So I'm a writer. Obviously, I love reading, but similar to you, like I think the most inspired I feel usually is from watching films. And that's a really great way to kind of reset your brain, I think, is to like push yourself out your comfort zone. Will, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, that very point. A friend of mine got me a book about filmmaking. He says
No.
there's no point in you going to a film thing talking about music samples and music because the guys are just not interested. So I can now sit and have a conversation, a bit more in depth about filmmaking and cameras and angles and stuff that I generally didn't know before. So even watching movies now, I've got a whole different perspective of, oh yeah, cool, I see what they're doing with that angle. Or fantastic advice. It's just dabble into other creative arts and that will inspire you.
Yeah, completely. Ash, do you have any thoughts as well about staying inspired creatively, maybe when you don't have the physical networks nearby?
I think obviously we've spoken about like the importance or like the need to have face-to-face connections with people, but I also think like post-COVID era has meant that we can basically like build these connections with like just calling people or with a click of a button through like Zoom or Teams. And I think that's probably the most important tool that people need to like utilize more. Like I know it's daunting, and obviously like I think I did 2 years of uni virtually, so I do hate it. But I think it is helpful, especially when you want to reach like you want to talk to people that are like miles and miles away from you. I think you can very easily like message someone on LinkedIn and just obviously like we were saying, like sugarcoat, like just kind of like send them like some praise about what they're doing and just say, oh, do you mind just jumping on a quick call to discuss this? And I think that's becoming more and more common. Like I think more people are like happy to just pick up the phone and talk to you about it. So I think that's probably the best, yeah, it's the best advice I think I could give on that.
Yeah, totally. COVID did change the game for good and for bad, but I think, yeah, definitely a positive that we're able to do stuff like this tonight where like everyone around the UK can join, which is great. There's a question from Dana. Do you have any advice for aspiring writers or novelists in terms of creating your own opportunities in that field? I don't mind starting off on that one. I would say look into as many like funding opportunities, like man open when agents open up their inboxes to like let you send over their manuscripts, that kind of thing. I would really like try and like set alerts on Creative Access jobs board for when any writing opportunities come in, and do the same on other jobs boards. Sign up to newsletters like Opportunity Tuesday is a really good one. Journo Resources. You think it's just journalism roles, but it's not. It's got loads of writing opportunities, writing competitions, and I would say definitely try and apply for some competitions, bursaries, funding, all of that jazz. Would any of you add to that? In terms of creating your own opportunities?
I think especially in like Manchester and like the Northwest, I think just find out like what the like publishing houses and what um like what authors are already in the region, and just see if you can like reach out to them or kind of just have a bit of a like a stalk on their websites and stuff, just to see like what there is out there. And I think also like feel like read like other cities and like other towns, obviously like they're just kind of like pools of inspiration. I feel like you can like go on a tram here like 40 minutes, a 40-minute journey, and you can wander around in like greenery that probably is less likely in London. So I think there are like equally, yeah, there are different opportunities in regions. So it's just like worth just researching a bit and seeing what's out there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I actually love that idea of maybe like emailing or like getting in touch with an author that's local to you, because they're probably going to be more likely to go for a coffee or give some advice to someone that is in a local area and that they, kind of already have like a built-in rapport with. Yeah, I don't know, Luke or Will, if you'd add to that at all.
There was one thing I was going to say. I guess it depends on the kind of writing, but I have friends who are pursuing careers as writers, mainly screenwriting, things like that, and they do they'll write just like short plays or short scripts and shop those around to like local theatre companies, and it's just an opportunity to like hear your work read out if it's picked, and like scratch notes and things like that. And it might not necessarily be the kind of writing that is priority, but I think it's just an opportunity again to be around the writers, be around creatives, bring your writing to life if you've never heard that happen before. It helps improve your writing because you get dialogue, whatever it is. So yeah, maybe like writing groups, scratching mates, things like that.
Yeah, I love that. Nice. I think we've got a couple more questions. Akin asked, what's your advice for a creative with a physical disability such as sight loss, but having challenges about people trusting them on what they can do? So yeah, I guess advice for proving your skills, firstly, and why clients or potential employers should trust you to do the job that you can do. Will, obviously, you spoke earlier about kind of building trust with clients. Can you speak to that experience a little bit more?
Yeah, it can be tricky, but I think if you're just working hard on your game isn't the thing that you're going to do. It's really going to shed you in good light, and I think when people see that, I think they start to relax and trust you. And I go back to the referral thing. The number of times, I've just worked with someone for the first time, they can see you do the job, and they'll introduce you to someone else, and it's a whole little chain that comes off of that. I'm not sure if that answers your question all that well or not, but
Yeah,
So,
I think sort of what you're saying is, okay, I guess building trust with one person can actually then create trust with lots of other people that in their network. And it's sort of like you said, getting that referral is, so key, isn't it? I guess it's just having one person in your corner to kind of stand up and be like, I trust this person. So it's about finding that one person, and then hopefully it's a bit of a domino effect. Is that kind of what you were saying?
yeah, I was just thinking back. So even just a couple of weeks ago, I did a free animation for someone. It was like 30 seconds, and he loved it. But at the animation festival, he introduced me as the guy who did the animation, and the company that he introduced me to going, oh, this is the guy that got me in with the
Yeah.
company. It's like, it took me a couple of hours out of my time, but it's things like that you have to do. Uh, yeah, I mean that's invaluable to me to be introduced to as a referral, as the guy. I'm happy to be the guy.
Yeah.
But
Completely.
yeah.
I get that. It's yeah, I guess sometimes being intentional about who you're working with and who they can potentially introduce you to as well, and hopefully build up the rapport with their networks as well. I think we've got time for one more question. So Caitlin asked, how do you deal with constant rejections without losing faith? Does anyone want to volunteer to take that one?
I don't mind doing that because yeah, I think originally when I graduated, I really wanted to get into publishing, and I think it was such a slog, and I had to deal with a lot of like rejection emails. Um, and I think the main advice is kind of just keep going at it. Like I think I was like when I first started out, because it's kind of like you learn through experience as well. So the way you write your CVs will also like evolve, and the way you like interview will also evolve the more and more times you do it. And I know it's disheartening, but like you will get to a stage where it's like you are like the best interviewer you could be, and you have a great CV. It is just the case of obviously like sticking it out. Um, and you will find something that you'll be able to thrive in. Like I think obviously like I'm not doing something that I'd originally set out to do, but I'm really enjoying it, and I really think I can build a full career out of it. So I think it's just like try and stick with it, and try and even explore like alternative routes. Like I think when I was first looking at PR, I kind of just like, oh, I can like move sideways. I can do PR and marketing, and I can kind of get like a PR and marketing role in like a publishing house or something. So I think it's like kind of trying to like think innovatively about how you can get into your career other ways. Um, yeah.
Yeah, completely. I think remaining open to the options and trying to think, okay, do I want that job as a journalist because I love writing? Yeah, fine. But what else involves writing all the time and interviewing people and chatting to people? And it might be like a comms role. It could be a lot of roles in the creative industries. And I think you're right, is keeping your options open and try and think what those skills that you're really, really interested in building, where else they exist and what other roles they exist in. So that is all we have time for. I am going to share my screen very quickly. Um, if it works. Yes. So I just want to say thank you so, so much to our wonderful panel for being so generous with their time and giving us such brilliant insights into how they've built successful careers and how you can build a successful career in the creative industries outside London. Ash, I loved you saying, I don't feel like I miss out not living in London. I just think that's such a great mantra to stand by. Will, I feel like I'm so inspired by all your tips about networking. And Luke, your passion for community is super inspiring as well. So yeah, thank you again. And a massive thank you, of course, to everyone who's come along tonight. I really hope you leave feeling inspired and that you've picked up some good tips and tricks. And don't forget, our write-up will be on our website as well, so you can catch up on this. Do make sure you follow us on socials @_creative access to keep up to date with our opportunities. It'd be really amazing as well if you could fill in our feedback form. The QR code is on the screen, and I believe my colleague has just dropped it into the chat. Your feedback really, really helps us shape future events and deliver the kind of content that you, our community, actually want to see. So please do fill it in and let us know how you found tonight and what you'd like to see in the future. We'll be sending a follow-up email to you all soon with all those details, as well as a recording of today's session. But for now, thank you again, and I hope to see you at a Creative Access event very soon. Bye.